Hello, hello. Today I'm going to talk about the Norman question, the historical people known as the Normans, and how understanding Norman history explains all English and American contemporary culture. Alright, let's go. The word Norman comes from the Scandinavian word Nordmen, literally meaning Northmen, which is what Norwegians call themselves today. Under Norwegian King Rollo, they were given Frankish lands in return for promising to stop dunking the Frankish king's head in the toilet. He was, quote, so big that no horse could carry him. These people were these huge, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, undefeatable supermen who killed everybody. So, this Norwegian king swore fealty to the French king, who asked Rollo to kiss his feet, which, of course, this proud man refused to do and had one of his giant Northmen do for him. This Viking proceeded to grab the puny Frank's foot and pulled it up to his face. He gave the king his kiss on the foot while he was dangling upside down like a captured fish from this superman's grip. Then the French king later abdicated for another, and Rollo felt his promises of peace were null and void and immediately went back to raiding Frankish lands, forcing the Franks back to the negotiation table and gave them even more lands. They took French wives, adopted Frankish culture, their language and their Christian religion, and so the modern Norman was born. When they were not busy bullying the French king into giving them free land, the Normans were all over Europe slapping some major cheeks. From the founding of the Kingdom of Sicily under King Roger II, taking southern Italy, Cyprus, the Canary Islands, sacking Rome and selling the Roman nobility and slaves, taking Seville and contributing to the Reconquista, crusading in the Muslim world, founding the Principality of Antioch, fighting the Byzantines, Armenia, Pechenegs, the Bulgars, the Seljuk Turks, the Irish, and most famously, the Anglo-Saxons. These guys were unstoppable. They were Scandinavian power manifest, right? So of course, the puny Anglo-Saxons stood no chance and were completely wiped out during the Battle of Hastings in 1066. William the Chad the Conqueror, having seized power over England, cucked the native English nobility by voiding all of their lands and titles and handing them over to his own kinfolk. The word Anglo-Saxon was invented to differentiate them from the Normans, the former serfs and the latter rulers. So it came that the Anglo-Saxons had become subjugated in their own homelands. They were not happy with this arrangement, so King William decided to teach them their place. He went up to Northumbria, where the Anglos were grumbling, and just genocided all of them. This act of pure madladdery has later become known as the Harrowing of the North. It is written that, hastening with an angry heart into Northumbria, ceased not during the whole winter to lay waste to the land, to murder the inhabitants and to inflict numerous injuries. Once again, the English would feel the fury of the Northmen or Normans from these descendants of Vikings. William combed the forests and remote mountain places, stopping at nothing to hunt out the enemy hidden there. His camps were spread over an area of 100 miles. He cut down many in his vengeance, destroyed the lairs of others, harried the land and burnt homes to ashes. Nowhere else had William shown such cruelty. It's estimated that between 100,000 and 150,000 Anglo-Saxons died from this. And he cut down everyone. Doesn't matter if they were innocent, guilty, women, children, elderly, infirm, doesn't matter, killed everybody. Those who did not weren't killed by the sword or the flame, they succumbed to the famine that resulted from the harrying. There was said that not a single village was left inhabited between York and Durham, and that the land was left uncultivated even 9 years later. This was such a power move that essentially ingrained in the Anglo-Saxons' mind that we are the Normans, we are your conquerors, we rule you now. That was the effect that it had on the Anglo-Saxon consciousness. Now, they start building these big castles all over England. If you've ever been to England, probably seen them. Tower of London is classic Norman architecture, and they were these oppressive castles, and what they were trying to say is that we are the Normans, we rule you, Anglo-Saxons, you are a inferior race to us, you are our subjects. So that's what you have to think every time you see a quaint medieval castle in England. That's the message it was built to send to people, right? So, why am I telling you this? Why is this important? Well, it's because the Anglo-Saxons were institutionally discriminated against in their own country for hundreds of years. There was the Normans that had created a sort of caste system in their homelands, where this one ethnic group lorded over the others. This drove the Anglo-Saxons to develop a sort of opposition to hereditary government in general, which later carried on to the US and the thought of the founding fathers. I'll get into that later. The Anglo-Saxons created their own brand of Christianity known as the Puritans, and then started the English Civil War that led to the execution of the Norman Catholic Charles I and tried to permanently abolish the House of Lords. This is no mere coincidence that they went after both the king and the aristocracy, because what the English Civil War really was, it was a continuation of the original Anglo-Saxon revolts that had been stopped by the harrying of the North. It was trying to free them, the Anglo-Saxons, of the Norman yoke that had been suppressing them for ages. And this went on, this conflict, the English Civil War, carried on into the United States, where people from both of these ethnic groups settled in the US. And you are mistaken if you think that these ethnic groups didn't matter once they had changed continent, because the southern slavers were a distinct ethnic group known as the Cavaliers, who are descendant of the Nordic Normans. They were not the same ethnicity as the northern Anglo-Saxons, and they made sure that everybody knew that they thought themselves superior to the others. So, it was written in the Southern Literary Messenger 1 year before the US Civil War started, in 1860, quote, "The Southern people come from that race recognized as Cavaliers, directly descended from the Norman barons of William the Conqueror, a race distinguished in its early history for its warlike and fearless character, a race in all times since renowned for its gallantry, chivalry, honor, gentleness, and intellect." Not convinced? There's more. Norman American George Fitzhugh, the South's most extreme and comprehensive pro-slavery theorist, clarified the relationship between race, slavery, and the Civil War amidst that violent clash of two Americas. Quote, "It is a gross mistake to suppose that the abolition is the cause of dissolution between the North and the South. The Cavaliers, Jacobites, and Huguenots of the South naturally hate, condemn, and despise the Puritans who settled the North. The former are master races, the latter a slave race, the descendant of Saxon serfs." This is a key piece of the racial puzzle of America. Fitzhugh implied that the North sided with the black slave race because the Anglo-Saxons themselves are a slave race. Fitzhugh depicted the Anglo-Saxons as the Negroes of post-conquest England. What the founding fathers, who were mostly Anglo-Saxons in America, had done when they created this sort of white identity of the white man, it was a completely novel idea, and it was completely crazy. And you have to see it as a sort of denial of Norman identity, because all white men were suddenly supposed to be equal, and it was a sort of fuck you to the superior Normans, who were now supposed to be brought down to the Anglo-Saxons levels as their equals, and the Anglo-Saxons took a lot of pride in that. So American identity of this, made-up concept of white person instead of, ethnic identities, it is all based on Anglo-Saxon inferiority complex that they have to bring down their former masters. The difference in opinion on the slave question cannot be explained by economic or climate factors. It's because they were settled by two different, distinct ethnic groups that were on the opposite end of the political spectrum that hated each other and had just fought a civil war against each other in England. The US Civil War was not about black slavery, it was about Norman mastery. Robert E. Lee himself was a descendant of William the Conqueror, and you can see Dixie as the final stand of the Normans. In the middle of the American Civil War, a Virginian declared, quote, "The Saxonized mawworms creeping from the Mayflower have no right to kinship with the whole-souled Norman British planters of the gallant race." They were continually seeing themselves as a gallant superior race, and the Anglo-Saxons as this upstart little race that was wild with zealotry, and they always blamed the Puritan zealotry on this new ideas of universalism as the cause of the US Civil War. A Civil War era congressman from Alabama professed a sovereign contempt for the memory of the Pilgrim Fathers and disposed of their Puritan religion as one of fanaticism, intolerance, of infidelity, bigotry, and hypocrisy. Essentially what they're saying is that America was founded by its time's own social justice warriors who just couldn't let anybody be and was continually whining about racial injustice and has to bring down everybody else to their level. Now, with the Normans gone, what do we have? Well, we have an America that is continually dominated by this Anglo-Saxon line of thought. That's why you see all these American boomers holding on to their guns, going like, I gotta have this gun to protect myself when the government comes. It is a inherited genetic trauma that they're still like afraid of the Normans. They're gonna come and genocide me any day now. But you know, the Anglo-Saxons, they lack any of the martial prowess that the Normans had. So that's why you see the same American boomers every time when push comes to shove, they just swallow everything whole. There is not gonna be an American Civil War 2.0 like the first one, because these people are just, I'm sorry, they're wimps. The Second Amendment is wasted on the Americans, so to speak. And that's why you see these Anglos today, they're so iffy about race, because they themselves have developed this sort of inferiority complex for hundreds of years for being oppressed in their own lands. That's why there is this very distinct Anglo culture when it comes to race, and they're constantly fighting for egalitarianism. Liberal democracy can be understood as an evolutionary thought that developed as a clash between two ethnic groups, and it was created as a weapon to fight Norman supremacy of an enslaved race, essentially. This is why when you start discussing race with an Englishman today, he is sent into a complete psychosis and starts babbling incoherently about completely unrelated terms, because he can't handle it. It is the same inherited genetic trauma that you see at play here. And the Bush family, interestingly enough, is a completely Puritan family. You can look up which American presidents come from Puritan families, and I bet you that if they waged war under that time, they probably lost the war, because Anglo-Saxons lack any and all martial prowess. The Bush family, of course, started the Iraq War, so I can say safely that we can chalk up the failure of the Iraq War as the lack of martial prowess in Anglo-Saxons. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope this has enlightened you about the Anglo question, and I'm gonna link the source to where I'm getting my material from in the description. Right, see you.